All right, let's go ahead and get started, guys. Thanks for hopping on today. Appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about how to really effectively communicate with our clients and really with each other for that matter. And before I get started, I just wanted to mention a couple of reminders. One is we're fast approaching the end of the year, so please make sure that if your local board does not automatically withdraw money from your account to pay your annual board fees, if that does not happen, make sure you go ahead and do that. Just as a reminder, if there is even one person that does not pay those, the whole office is shut down on the MLS side. So please remember to go in and do that. And then just as a reminder, I am on vacation next week, actually starting Saturday. And so my backup person is Julia and Jeff Koppel, and their number is on our website. So if you have any questions that are of an urgent nature, by all means, reach out to those guys. They will get your questions answered. And then after today, since I am on vacation next week, that would bring us to the last 2 weeks of the year, which are the holidays. And so typically I do not have meetings during that week. So just kind of allows me some time to recharge, and you guys time to recharge. And so we will be back with regular meetings right after that, which would be the 6th of January. Okay. And then our business planning meeting is the 13th of January. That's a Thursday as well. I'll send out more information on that as the date approaches. So just FYI. So let's kind of launch into today's training. So if you're like me, it kind of doesn't matter whether you've talked to 1,000 people or one person in our area of expertise. Sometimes we're not as prepared as we probably should be. And so it really comes down to being as mentally proactive as you possibly can with your clients in anticipation of what they might be throwing at you. Okay. And so why is this important? Well, it does matter what you say. There's a lot of agents out there that will innocently say something and have it turn into just a train wreck. And so it does matter what we say, and it matters how you say it. And so when you think about the amount of time that we have with our client, even in today's market, where if you represent a buyer and you're having to go a little bit longer because there's not a whole lot for sale, it's still a very brief amount of time. And so that means that we have to be as effective as possible with what we say and how we say, because as you guys know, there's a lot of twists and turns in each transaction that can go sideways really quick if we're not experienced at this. Okay, and so you're trying to prevent indecision, and this really applies to either a buyer or a seller. There's lots of crossroads in a transaction, and if a client has not done this at all or in a while, well, then there's a tendency to become paralyzed with what they have to do. And so you're trying to prevent that. And then you're trying to minimize delays in the process, and you're trying to minimize any unnecessary dysfunction in the transaction. Okay, so whenever we talk about what we say and how we say it in the real estate business, it is only a matter of time before someone mentions the S word. Well, what's the S word? It's scripts. Okay, so look at any YouTube video, buy any kind of real estate sales course. They will undoubtedly refer to scripts. So my feeling on what scripts are is that they're really just merely ways that you internalize and think about concepts that then become words that come out of your mouth. So there are plenty of companies that are none too happy to sell you what you should say based on what situation. But it really comes down to your own personality and how you want to convey what you want to convey. And what I don't think they should be is someone else's canned responses. Now, for right or for wrong, we do have a booklet of scripts on our website written by Tom Ferry, and he's a very well-known real estate coach. But even reading through them, again, you're going to either resonate with what's on that page or not. And usually examples of what you should say are not at all how you would say them. So don't think that you're handcuffed to someone else's way of saying something, because the same phrases don't work all the time, and the same phrases don't work for each individual. All right, so your scripts are yours. So when we talk about what to say and how to say it, what scenarios matter the most in real estate? Well, in a buyer's presentation, absolutely. Showing homes to buyers, it matters. When you're doing a listing presentation, prospecting or cold calling, and then just general follow-up. And then contract negotiations. So think about those times where you have to negotiate repairs, negotiate the price, a closing date extension, or any kind of concessions, right? So basically from this list, it's all the time, right? So we have to be efficient at this, or we run the risk of everything going sideways on us. So I'm going to go through a couple of these, in fact, all of them, to kind of give you kind of what the end goal is during each of these interactions with your clients. And then we're going to look at actual examples of what you should say. Okay, so let's just talk about the buyer's presentation. So think about, let me set the stage for you. You may or may not have ever met this person before. If so, it's one or two phone calls or maybe a text. This is the time where you, the agent, are taking control of what's going to happen next. All right. And so the goal is to, in this interaction, build rapport, build excitement for their new purchase, build their confidence in you, because they could have chosen anybody. And as I've mentioned many times before, you don't want to give the client an excuse to just drop you and go with another agent. You also want to establish that you are in control and driving this process. And then lastly, the goal is to close the deal by ensuring they remove all obstacles from purchasing. Okay, so why do I phrase it that way? Because if you, and again, this is buyers, it is not uncommon for a buyer to love the idea of buying a home, but have no intention of actually carrying that through. And so they're somewhat easy to spot because they start sabotaging this process. Okay, and so really your only job is to, in this example, is to unite a willing buyer with a willing seller. Okay, and so your job is to assume that they want to buy the home. And so you're just taking that ball and running with it. And so you're going to show them homes, and your mission is to close that deal because they've already raised their hand and said, I want to go buy a home. But your job is also to navigate through the minefield that is indecision. I really don't want the home. I really don't want to move. This was my spouse's idea, all of that, right? So what are some samples of what you could say? Well, in my mind, whether it's a buyer or a seller, but specifically a buyer, it's all about listening more and speaking less. So you will see a common thread amongst all of these phrases, and I want you to see if you can find out what it is. So if you're in a buyer's presentation, you are not likely going to know what they know about what's ahead. And so a question might be, tell me what you know about this process so far. Okay, so that gives them a chance to, again, speak more than you're speaking. The next is, where do you think the most accurate place is to find your perfect home? Okay, and so why would I propose this question? Well, 95% or better of buyers are starting their search online, and they are usually going to Zillow or Realtor.com. And in Texas, we do not publicly publish what homes have sold for. And so therefore, an estimate or an algorithmic valuation from Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, whoever, is not going to be as accurate, nor is the status of that home going to be as accurate. Now, the good news is that the internet has made everything transparent. I mean, I think few could argue that the initial stage of home search has become a lot easier for us because we're not the only ones that have the listings anymore. It's all out there. But the challenge is that companies like Zillow and Realtor.com don't have a one-to-one interface with our MLS. And so the buyer is looking at homes that may not be available. So this question is designed to uncover where it is they think is going to be the most accurate. Because if it's going to be nothing more than a rhythm of, they're going to look on Zillow and they're going to tell you to show up at XYZ home at 4 o'clock to show them, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. And that's a point where you can say, well, did you know everything that I just told you about Zillow and Realtor.com? Okay. All right. Then the next example might be, I know you probably want to get into your new home as quickly and as smoothly as possible. So I am going to explain how we can work together to get that done. So this changes the balance of power from them to you, because it's so transparent regarding every buyer's visibility into listings. It is very easy to just take their lead, and that is not what you want to have happen, because the wheels can fall off the bus real quickly. Okay, they'll start driving the process and having unrealistic expectations, and be, quite frankly, probably working off of bad information, unless you take control at this exact moment and tell them what is about to happen. Okay. All right, and then next is, have you thought about the things about your home you have to have versus the things you want to have? All right, so this kind of sets up the expectation that they're going to see homes that may or may not 100% fit their list of gotta have. All right, there is going to be no perfect home. That's going to be rare. So this is setting their expectation. And then lastly, does this process seem overwhelming? All right, so you'll get an emotional temperature check at that moment, because it probably is. And so you're assuming that it is, because the follow-up is, what parts do you need to know more about? And if it were me, I would say things like, okay, so what parts do you need to know more about? Do y'all understand the lending process? Have you been to a lender yet? Can I recommend one for you? Do you know what the inspection process looks like? Have you ever seen the contract you're about to sign? And now, mind you, on our website, under the tab for buyer-seller leases, we have a buyer's presentation that has all this stuff in there. It has a 1-to-4, it has all the things that we're talking about. But at this point, they will not have seen that yet. Okay, so you want to get an emotional temperature check on if they are just a walking nerve ending, or if they've been through this before and they kind of know what's going to happen. So before I move forward, does anybody know what the commonality is between amongst all these 5 examples? Any guesses? They're open-ended. So it's impossible for them to answer yes or no. Okay, these are intended to get them talking, and get them talking about things that are, quite frankly, more important to you than they are to them. Okay, but it also creates buy-in to the process. All right, so let's talk about the next phase in the buying process, and that is it's time to show them some homes. So what's the goal here? The goal is to continue to refine the search based on their feedback so you can find them what they want sooner. Okay, so during that list or that buyer's presentation, they may have told you, I want an outdoor kitchen, I want the master bedroom to be downstairs, and I want a pool. And then you start showing them homes like that, and they start kind of souring on the pool, or they just generally just change their mind, right? And that's natural, because up until this point, it's all just been theory. So right now, they're actually in other homes, and they have a better context as to what they actually want. So this is the absolute goal on your part. The next is set their expectations based on which homes you are visiting. Some may be difficult sellers, they might need repair, poor location, overpriced, etc. But use this to educate. Okay? And so there is no better situation these days than the fact that if you're even getting into a home, that means that it may not be here for much longer. Okay, and so the last goal is to avoid a rocky process, right? You don't want your client complaining to their neighbor that, you know, my agent keeps showing me homes I have no interest in. And so it's got to be collaborative at this point. So what are some sample questions here? And I've made mention that this is a 100% emotional purchase. So every year, which I'll present at our goal setting session in January, there is a both a TAR and a NAR survey. And they survey, I want to say, 100 clients that have been through either a purchase or a sale recently. And when they survey buyers, and the question is, how did you choose your home? They always say, an overwhelming percentage always say, it just felt like the right home, right? So logic goes out the window. The other equally as intriguing question is, what made you decide to move? You know, what made you decide to buy right now? Similar answer, they say it just felt like the right time. Okay, and so those kinds of surveys don't go much deeper than that. I'm sure there's lots of psychological reasons as to why they say that, and it's probably not only it just kind of felt right, but it does support the fact that the biggest purchase in someone's life actually is a very emotionally driven occurrence. All right, so you would say the only rule today, remember, you're about to go show homes. The only rule today is to be brutally honest with me so I don't waste time showing you homes you don't like. Okay, so typically people will take the path of least resistance because they don't want to hurt your feelings, but their time is as valuable as yours. And so telling them this gives them permission to be brutally honest with you, to say, look, we've actually kind of changed our minds. We don't want a pool, or, you know, this is just not the right neighborhood type of deal. Okay. And then secondarily, you won't hurt my feelings if you drive up to a home and simply decide you don't want to go in. And that happens all the time. happens all the time. And it's not necessarily a reflection on the neighborhood, although sometimes it is. A lot of times it's curb appeal. I mean, they can just tell, if it looks this bad on the outside, what could it possibly look like on the inside? And so, that will happen. So you have to give them permission to do that. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this one? Right, so they've toured the home. You kind of sense that they're not in love with it, but you want to know kind of what the details are. So you might start with saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this? Okay, and whatever they say why, because they're going to give you a number that's not 10. So even if they say a 9, just say, what would make it a 10? Okay, could you see yourself living here? And this question is important because it is such an emotional purchase, that they have to honestly be able to visualize their furniture in that space, and they need to feel and see themselves living in that home. And if they haven't thought about it up until that point, you're forcing them to think about it. And believe it or not, if they've seen 25 homes already and they're just overwhelmed with options, that one question could seal the deal for you. Okay, what are the pros and cons? Any deal breakers? Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. What did you like? What did you not like? What would prevent you from buying this home? All right, and then lastly, in today's market, man, these move fast. So if we need to come back and take a look later today, we can, but just letting you know, if you wait too long on any of these, they could be gone. Now, you have to be careful here because you don't want to come off as coercing them to make a decision that they wouldn't normally make, right? You don't want to cause them to pull the trigger under duress. And I would tell them that. But this statement is a factual statement. What they're looking at today may not be here tomorrow. And you know how horrible sellers agents are to get a hold of if your buyer does happen to really like it. The more they can come to a decision now, the better. All right, so listing presentation. So let's switch to sellers. The goal is to really build rapport and connect with that seller. So let's assume that you don't know them very well, and you need to make sure that you're connecting with that client. Why? Because you're not going to connect with everybody, number one. Number two, they're about to entrust you with selling their most valuable asset that they have, okay? So, which segues into the next point, which is build their confidence in you. That's the goal. Other goal, convince them that you will make this process smooth, okay? Unless they just sold their home last year, they're rusty. They need to be guided, all right? So they need to know that you're bringing your A game. Next, demonstrate confidence and knowledge. All right, so yes is the question, or I'm sorry, yes is the answer, what's the question type of mentality. Convey expertise in pricing, marketing, and distribution, because those are the three foundational things that will sell a home. How you price it, how you market it, and how many people see it, which is distribution. So that could be MLS, could be your own website, could be your office website, could be open houses, could be whatever. All right, and then your goal is to make them part of the process, and to go one step further to get them to agree with you and to get their buy-in. Because if they do that, then they really have no one to blame. Okay, so what are some things that we can say during a listing presentation that would make this process go smoother? So listen and collaborate. So what part of this process overwhelms you or makes you nervous? So again, we're trying to pinpoint any emotional baggage that they're bringing to this process. And I might follow up by saying, be honest, we got to get this out in the open now. I mean, what overwhelms you? What scares you about this process? Is it me? Is it that you don't know what's next? What are your friends telling you? What are your neighbors telling you should happen? Let's get all that out into the open. When you think of the perfect realtor selling your home, what does that look like? Okay, so again, all these are open-ended. This is during the listing presentation. This is the conversation between you and them. This is not you vomiting how great you are and how you're going to sell their home in 6 hours. Okay, you're trying to get feedback. How involved do you want to be? And this may seem like a silly question, but some sellers don't want to be involved at all. They're hiring you for a reason. Do your job. I trust you until you give me a reason not to. Some are the complete opposite. They want to be hyper involved. I will say this, that the cardinal sin of a realtor is if you wait for a client to ask you a question about something that you should have addressed earlier, that's a sure way that you're not being as attentive as you should be. Okay, but that does speak to involvement. Okay, how willing are you to accept my direction regarding price, condition, and generally what it takes to sell the home? Scale of 1 to 10. Are you driving this bus or am I? Because from me to you guys, you should be driving it. I know it seems obvious, but when it comes to sellers, they want to drive the bus a lot of times. And so you want to get a temperature check on how willing they are to accept that direction. And that prepares them for the fact that you're going to give it to them. All right. So the next one is, well, I know I can sell your home and get you on your way to Florida or wherever they're moving. Are you ready to move forward? Okay. Now that is a yes or no question, but that is the fork in the road where you decide whether or not you're getting that listing or not. Okay. Another kind of closing is, if you're ready to sign your listing agreement, I am ready to get to work immediately for you. So you're creating a level of urgency. And you're literally painting a picture that once they sign this document, you start work. And then lastly, well, I came prepared with the necessary paperwork. If you're ready, once this is signed, I can get started with pictures and staging. And so similar to the previous statement, this just further outlines what getting to work immediately for you actually means. Like, oh, okay, pictures and staging, okay. And then there's going to be some, guidance there, but that just kind of moves them past this awkward moment of, am I your person or not? Okay, so let's talk about the prospecting and cold calling process. So this is trying to get new clients. The goal is to spoon feed them exactly why they should use you. Okay, so many agents and just people in sales in general, doesn't matter what business it is, tend to be too vague about what their value proposition is. Okay, and a lot of times that's because you haven't spent the time to specify who your client actually is. But if you're prospecting, think about what that looks like. It's either a call, it's an email, it's a text, it's a video, it's a website they go to. Do they know? Is it crystal clear as to what you're trying to accomplish? Is it crystal clear what your value proposition actually is? So I always use the example of referrals. So if you've closed a transaction with a client and it went great, your assumption might be walking away that they're going to refer business to you. Theirs usually is not. Okay, unless you overtly ask for it. Okay, so it's kind of like when you get to the end of the transaction, you ask them to post a review. They would never have done that unless you ask them to. So the referral example is a good one because you're trying to spoon feed them exactly what your expectation is, and they're glad to do it. They just didn't know that was their role. Okay. Next, create a sense of curiosity in what it is you have to offer. Next, build rapport. The next goal is avoid the hard sell. Remember, everyone wants to buy, they just don't want to be sold to. They don't want to be pitched to, okay? I can't tell you how irritated I get every time I have to, drive a quarter mile down the street to go into the neighborhood Walmart, and there is someone out there soliciting something from me. I just want to go to my neighborhood store, get what I want, and go. Had it been a softer approach, I may have entertained what it is that you're trying to sell me. But I don't like that, and I don't think anybody else does either. And then lastly, increase your odds of being in the right place at the right time. Why is this important? Because inventory is tight. People used to move every 7 or 8 years. It's more like 12 or 13. And we know that we have to talk to more people than we did 5 or 10 years ago. And so unless they have a need, it's going to be a moot point. So you want to make sure that you're increasing your odds of being in front of more people, and therefore increasing the odds of being in the right place at the right time in front of someone that actually has a need. All right, so samples would be, in my opinion, just keep this conversational. You're trying to get them to build a rapport with you and hire you. And so I would not speak at them, I would speak with them. So some examples would be, hey, was just thinking about you and hope you're doing well. I loved your recent post about whatever it was. These are great for note cards, okay? These are great for note cards that go to people that you feel awkward reaching out to because you haven't talked to them in 10 months. Okay, so there is a way to kind of resuscitate that relationship, and nothing is more endearing than a personal note. And this is what you could say. Thought you might be interested in this. Pretty compelling. Short and sweet. Works great for CMAs. Works great for an RPR report that you're leaving on the doorstep of someone that you found on Remind. It's to the point. And it could be even on a sticky note or on the face of the manila envelope. Thought you might be interested in this. Pretty compelling. How could someone not respond to that? Okay. Do you have a coworker who is looking to buy their next home? So why did I put this one in there? Because it assumes that the person you're in front of isn't looking to buy their next home. Now, you may or may not know that, but this is a good example of specificity, because it's going to cause them to think specifically about their coworker or coworkers and whether or not they've been in conversations with anybody recently where someone has mentioned they have a real estate need. Okay, so could be coworker, could be relative, could be whoever, fill in the blank. Okay, if you're tired of renting, I may be able to help. Obvious audience, a renter. Have you ever thought about a brand new home? Builders in the area have some crazy deals going on, and that gets them thinking, right? New construction versus pre-owned. All right, there's a buyer for every home. I can help. I can help you. This is great for expired listings, for sale by owners, just listings in general where they may be frustrated, especially since we live in kind of a soundbite world, and the soundbite lately is market softening, not as many offers, sellers might be getting a little nervous. Okay, but if you tell them, look, there's a buyer for every home, let's break this down, I can help you. Okay, let's talk about the contract negotiation piece. So the goal, whether you represent the buyer or the seller, first and foremost is to not be difficult and egotistical. Okay, it's better to do the right thing than it is to be right. Okay, even if you know the other side is wrong, you want to do and say the things that are going to close that deal. So this is assuming that the contract, and I think it's a lot of these examples, is already executed. So as I've mentioned before, once that executed date gets stamped on there, your singular goal is to close the deal. And to keep that in check, you can't be difficult, you can't be egotistical. Okay, do what's best for your client while being reasonable. Okay, I can't tell you how many agents I know that will brag to their clients in a way that is kind of like this. Oh, they want us to pay for the seller's policy or a title policy. Watch this. I'm going to work my magic. I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that off this CD for you. Don't you worry. I'll take care of that. That's not reasonable. I mean, if you're the buyer, why would you pay the seller's policy in this example, right? So you can't just make those kinds of statements just because. I mean, your goal is to close the deal, not to kill the deal. All right, the next is a win-win or compromise. Okay, to not win at any cost, okay, which is kind of my example earlier. And then lastly, to minimize dysfunction or emotion or having the deal not close. And you may have seen it, and people will walk away over $500. People will walk away just on principle, and it gets ugly, especially if it's the seller telling you that, because it's lawsuit time if it is. Okay, so let's talk about examples of what you might be able to say. And in this phase, until you recognize that the dust has settled and you're cruising on to closing date, it is appropriate to be assertive yet polite. Okay, so this would be for a buyer. I know this seems like a lot of things the inspector found, but what do you think is reasonable to ask for? Okay, what do you think is reasonable to ask for? Now, before the inspection happened, I hope you had a conversation with that buyer that said, look, we're looking at foundation, roof, HVAC, hot water heater. Those are the big ticket items. So just FYI, if any of those things get dinged, let's look at it. Everything else, I would strongly consider not making a big deal about. Okay, drip faucet, crack in the tile, you're asking for trouble. Okay, next, what will it take to have your client make an offer? So this would be if you were the listing agent and you had people come through, let's say you got 10 showings and no offers. Well, that might be cause for you to pick up the phone and reach out to all those agents that showed it and say this. What happened? Why didn't they like the home? What could I do? What will it take to have your client make an offer? This works especially well for higher priced listings where there aren't many showings, just because the price tag is too high. Okay. Whether you represent buyer or seller, you could use this one. My client is thinking this. Okay, would you be agreeable to that? Okay, so the this could be the client's thinking of asking for just a cursory clean out of the HVAC system. We're not going to ask for anything else. Would you be agreeable to that? That's the classy way to approach it, right? None of this, I'm demanding this, I'm demanding this, you better agree to this or we're walking, okay? You will find that a lot of this, you know, chest pounding and saber rattling is really the agent on the other side. It is not the client doing any of that. So you just need to know that going in. And this statement kind of disarms that other agent. Okay, so those are the major scenarios. So if you guys aren't aware, more of this kind of content can be found on our website. We do have scripts for any situation. This is on the business building tab. Okay, I also have effective closing techniques. Okay, I have thank you note templates, which are, if you are just at an absolute loss for what to write in a note card, I have that. I have FSBO scripts. I have 55 questions that get you from how are you to who are you, which are just thought starters, questions that you can ask your clients just to get them talking. Okay, just go beyond the small talk. Okay, so remember, listen more, talk less. Make your client an important part of the process versus vomiting your real estate greatness all over them. It is far less important who is right than what is right. Okay, so does anyone have any input on what may have worked for you in the past, or what your thoughts are on this? What's worked well out there?
For buyers, I was asked the question, is this your dream house? Is this, how important is this house to you? And depending on what comes back on the inspection report, how much are you willing to overlook from the inspection report in order to accept the house?
That's a good one. And there is no right or wrong answer, because they're going to be the ones that have to live there. Good, thanks, Jeff. Any other thoughts? Anybody been in a difficult situation, they just kind of landed on the right thing to say? No? Okay. Well, I do get a lot of calls from all of y'all when you're in these kind of situations where you don't quite know what to say or how to navigate through a particular scenario. So by all means, keep those calls coming, keep those questions coming. It's tricky. I personally have the tendency to be faced with a situation and not necessarily always be ready with an answer at that point. But when I step away and I have time to think through it and internalize it, I come back with the exact right thing to say. And so maybe you're like that as well, and that's perfectly fine. But if you ever do get stuck, please feel free to reach out. I mean, we can talk through it. There's many different angles to every situation. So, well, good deal. Well, thank you guys for attending. Hope you found this valuable. And as always, if you have any other questions, let me know. But if I don't talk to any of you guys before the holiday, please have a great holiday and take some well-deserved time off. And we will see you back here in this format the first week of January. All right. Take care, all.
Thank you, Brad.
Bye. Thank you.